Hey folks, here's some points about grip mechanics for the French grip. The French grip being thumbs on top of your drumsticks. That's as opposed to palms down or something like this, which is called German grip or American grip, which is kind of a hybrid of the two. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about optimizing this kind of grip for good finger leverage and just general ease in any sort of tempo. So the first thing I want to talk about is my forearms. So when I'm playing, I have my forearms angled inward, and then I have my wrists tilted outward a little bit to compensate. What that allows is puts me in a position where if I'm doing wrist strokes like this, I'm not just using this sort of motion from my wrist. I'm using a bit of this, but also a bit of rotation from the forearm. So I've got kind of a thing like this. What that does is takes some stress off of the wrist joint. Because if you're just doing this all the time, it can get really hard on that joint. So we have that sort of combination movement. Next of all is the fulcrum. The fulcrum, for that, I'm using the first knuckle of the index finger, which creates a little trough here, and that's what the stick is resting in. And then the thumb is up almost just across from that, not quite. But I'll discuss that in a moment. So the same goes for the next three fingers. The stick is resting into the first joint of each of those fingers, all of which make a little trough. So we have a little deal like this. So what I was saying about the thumb and forefinger, however, is that the forefinger is just, in terms of front to back of the stick, the finger is just behind the thumb. What that enables is something like this. It allows the index finger to be involved in the process of moving the drumstick, involved in leverage, creating downstrokes, and doing the dribbling sort of motion that I talk about in other videos. So that way you have all four fingers involved, which is really helpful for the fastest tempos. I mean, because that's one more finger that takes the weight off from the other three fingers. So it's kind of helpful. One other point is this. I'm keeping the hand I'm keeping the stick down away from the palm a little bit. Toward the tip of the fingers, toward the end of the hand is where the stick is hanging out a bit more. So instead of being up next to the palm, it's out here with sort of an open hand position. What that enables is, if you look at the direction in which my fingers are pulling, out here, it lines up with the direction that the stick needs to move. If the stick starts to come up to the palm, it begins rotating through its arc, and then it's moving more up and forward or something like this, and then if I bring my fingers up to reach it, they're still going to keep pulling in the same direction that they were when they were out here, and that doesn't line up with the direction in which the stick itself needs to move. So that's why I have this part of the finger opened up, and then the butt of the stick brought out away from the palm. But another point is, in terms of if you look from this angle, you'll see that the stick is lined up underneath the thumb, as opposed to being out here, kind of perpendicular to the thumb a little bit. What happens is, if you bring it out here, is that the fingers have to reach out, sort of like this, flatten out, in order to extend and reach the stick, like especially the pinky. So you get this kind of deal, which I've seen, but I don't recommend doing that for the same reason that I wouldn't recommend climbing up a rock wall with your fingers like this. If you want good leverage, enough to support your body weight, you're going to just instinctively do it this way. Gives you better leverage as opposed to out here. So the same thing goes for the drumsticks. So that's why I keep it lined up sort of underneath the thumb. Yeah, so those are some of the main points. Hopefully that helps out a little bit in terms of just general comfort for any tempos, and then also for for speeding up into that sort of range. I mean, one last point I suppose I should bring up is just general contact, keeping all of your fingers in contact with the drumsticks, and yeah, that about wraps it up.